Hope everybody's doing well today. I want to welcome everybody to the Unimpressed Podcast today. And today we have a very special guest on the Unimpressed Podcast. He's a restaurateur, chef, author, Mr. Andy Murray, and famous brother called Bill Murray. Welcome to the show, Andy Murray. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, John.
Andy, I like having people on here, and I kind of do things a little different. I kind of interview people from the foundation up, dig into their head a little bit and see what they're all about, what makes them tick. And obviously you come from a big family, and growing up in the Chicago area, did you ever think that you would be in the restaurant business as a younger adult?
Yeah, actually I did. I started cooking pretty young, but I started working in restaurants even, when I was first restaurant I worked at, I was 11 years old. I don't think they let you do that anymore, but I was able to do that. So, at the time, I was always thinking how I could do something better than the guy who owned the restaurant. One restaurant owner told me, when you own your own successful restaurant, you can do whatever you want. That's pretty much what I've done.
When I think about that, and you having a brother in the creative space, chefs as well, I think are the same thing. I think chefs are artists, just like any other artist. Have you ever thought you were an artist?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a comfort thing. It makes you feel good. But I've been in plenty of places where people think they're a pretty good cook, and they're awful. Sometimes making food be spectacular is an art. Yeah.
What is your specialty when you approach a dish or a thought process of making food? What would be your specialty? How would you go about it?
Well, I was trained mostly by French guys in the beginning. And I have this huge love for French food and sauces. And anytime I can make anything with a sauce, right there at the top of my list. It's a fun idea. You sit down and say, well, what am I going to do? What's in the refrigerator? What am I going to make with this stuff? And how can I throw this together and make it so everybody likes it, not just me?
Now, when you approach flavor, is there a thought process you have with approaching flavor and how you would change flavors out? Is there, like I said, I'm trying to get into saying, hey, what's going to make Andy Murray's restaurant different? What are people going to recognize when they walk in the door?
It's going to be comfortable. It's going to be probably something that they're kind of similar. They've had somewhere. This is stuff I grew up with, and I go back to it and say, well, what would Mom make? And and then try to layer things on top so I can see what works, what doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work at all.
How many brothers and sisters you have in the family?
Well, there were nine children: Ed, Brian, Nancy, Peggy, Billy, Laura, Andy, John, Joel. And so there was, the dinner table, there was 11 of us at the table because, from Sunday through Thursday, we sat down, we had dinner with the family. Friday, Saturday, we could do whatever we wanted. But, Sunday through Thursday, you better be there. And it was, nobody ate until Mom sat down and Dad, had carved and served every plate and passed it down. We really worked. Our parents worked on our manners. No elbows on the table. God, I can't tell you how many times my father, took the fat end of a knife and hit your funny bone on your elbow to get your elbows off the table.
It must have been a lot of food to be cooking for 11. How many days? That's 5 days a week?
It was 5 days a week. Yeah, it was a lot of food. Mom made a lot of food. We came home from school at 3:00 and we were hungry, but we didn't eat to dinner until my dad got there home at 6:00. My mom had, 6-8 loaves of bread at the house all the time. So when you came home, it's make a sandwich, make a peanut butter, mayonnaise, and lettuce sandwich, make, a bologna sandwich, make a sandwich, period. But, and eat it over the sink so you wouldn't get crumbs on the floor. That was it. We were always eating. And if you didn't finish what was on your plate, your brother would look over and go, you can eat that? And that was gone.
What was it like at the time coming up in Chicago with a big family and a lot of tradition there and so forth? What was it like back then?
It wasn't that unusual to have big families. There were a lot of people at that time that had big families. We weren't the only people with 9 kids. And the O'Garas had 9 kids. The Collinses had 9 kids. Multiple people had 7 and 8 kids. So it wasn't that strange. But, all these people, they love my mother. So, hey, it's the Murrays. We can get away with something.
Did creative piece come from your mother or your father? Were they creative? Obviously, your mother had to cook well if she was feeding that many people. Where do you think that the talents came from?
When my mom and dad got married, my mom had gone to a cooking school, a French cooking school, and my dad had gone to a carving school. So they knew how to, I don't think they planned on having 9 children. My dad was a meat and potatoes guy. And so it was pretty much meat and potatoes, and it was a lot of well done meat, to tell you the truth. We didn't, very little fish. The only fish we ate was Fridays because it was Friday and we were Catholic, and it was fish sticks usually, or tuna noodle casserole, something like that. Mom wasn't that, they weren't that creative at that point. It was a lot of Betty Crocker stuff, recipes too.
With the kids, were there any other actors in the family as well besides Bill?
Yeah. Dinner table at our house was a lot of one-liners. There was 11 of us around the table. My dad and mom were funny people, but my dad was very funny. He had a very dry sense of humor. And if you could make my dad laugh, you were doing a really good job. And you knew it. That's, I think, where the success and humor of my family came from. It started at the dinner table.
Now, were they the type of family, and obviously when the kids were together, who was the one kid that stood out the most? Might have been a little more crazy than others.
Originally, it was probably Brian. Brian was the first one. Brian was the one who came home. Brian was the first one who smoked cigarettes and smoked a cigarette at the dinner table and was blowing smoke rings, and we were in awe. God, he can blow a smoke ring. I've got Nancy, that's another sister who's very funny, and Peggy's very funny. Billy and Edward were funny in their own way. Billy kind of took over after Brian started moving out. Edward left to go to the Air Force, and Brian and Billy, and when Brian went to college, then Billy took over as the funny guy. But it was a lot of one-liners. I had friends who used to come over to the house and just to be insulted. They enjoyed that.
It's funny. I've never met your brother. I actually moved from New Jersey. I lived in North Caldwell, New Jersey, 12 and a half years, and we moved to Charleston, South Carolina during the pandemic because I went to college there. And I think that's where your brother calls home. And
he had a place right. I don't know where in Jersey you were, but he got a place in New York that's right by the Jersey border, right across by the Hudson. And he's got the place down in South Carolina, and he's got another place, a couple other places too.
How many kids do you have?
I just have one, the Prince in the Air.
And what does your kid do?
My boy Drew, he works for a company called Atmosphere that are partners with the Chive Media Company. That's a media company.
Oh, okay, Chive. What is your approach from a business structure if you're in St. Augustine and in Chicago? And you've had several different restaurants. Is there an approach to that piece of business?
Well, originally my approach was I wanted to kind of copy the Mortimer's restaurant where I worked at in New York. That's where, I did a lot of cooking. I cooked for a lot of different people there. It was try to put out a really, a good product for a good price. Mortimer's was a place where it was the corner saloon for the rich and society blue bloods in Manhattan. That's where they hung out, and that's where they ate an awful lot. And so I just figured that if I could do that, if I could copy that somewhat and still bring in the goofiness of the movie Caddyshack. Mm-hmm. But it was, because Warner Brothers owns Caddyshack, we had to be Murray Brothers Caddyshack. Warner Brothers was very helpful and was very supportive of us. It all worked out.
Do you being a Chicago guy, what differences do you like compared to Chicago and New York? If you cut your teeth in New York.
Well, in New York, I moved to New York when I was 22, 23. And, my brother was on Saturday Night Live. It was great. You couldn't have asked for a better time to be in New York. It was a very exciting time to be there. All the clubs, everything was on page 6 in the Post, the gossip columns and who was there. And I was at that party. It was fun to name drop it back then. But Chicago is my home, and Chicago is what I love. It's where my family's from. It's where, we all come back and we just get stronger every time we come back here.
Now, when you talk about, being around the celebrity world, is there something you would have done differently looking back on it?
I would have studied harder in school and gone into banking. That's probably what I would have done. I am what I am. But what I did, I'm pretty happy with would I have been an actor? No. For a long time, I was like a deer in the headlights. When you put me on stage, I was, I couldn't get it out of my mouth. But I've gotten, as the years have gone on, on, it's gotten easier.
As the family was going through this experience that your family has gotten to, did you anticipate that at all? Or
I always thought my brothers were going to be. I knew Billy was going to be successful. He was the smartest guy. When Billy's funny, there's nobody funnier. So yeah, no, I always believed that he would be as successful as he is. I didn't realize how much of a superstar, he would become, but yeah, I believed he would be successful from an early age.
And what do you think about the intelligence? A lot of people don't talk about that. I think comedians and so forth have a very high intelligence and maybe communicate a little bit differently. Did you ever process that or could tell a difference of intelligence being around a great comedian?
I was lucky enough that, because Brian was in Second City first. He was the one who went to Second City first, and he brought Billy in. When Brian was in it, Brian was in the group at Second City that, was John Belushi and Harold Ramis, Betty Thomas, and Joe Flaherty. I mean, those were some real geniuses, comedic geniuses. Brian was just as funny as any of them. When Billy came in, Billy just, he was phenomenal on stage. He really was.
What was the years apart of all the brothers?
Well, there's 18 years from top to bottom. And so, I think Billy is 4 or 5 years younger than Brian. I'm 6 years younger than Billy. Joel's 6 years younger than me. So, yeah, it's 18 from top to bottom.
Looking at talking about this book that you put together, what was your inspiration for the book?
I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner. This is 3 years ago at my brother Billy's house in South Carolina. Driven up from Florida, and the night before Thanksgiving, we had gone to the store, and Billy ended up getting this 26-pound turkey. And I'm like, well, there's only 8 people here. We don't need this much turkey. Oh, no, there'll be leftovers. And so he ended up inviting a few more people just to make it, see, there are more people. As I was cooking, I was working this whole day, just sweating, making this dinner up. And this really attractive woman came in and sat down and watched me and drinking her champagne and watching me cook. And I was hoping she would wash a dish or, chop something for me to make my life easier, but she didn't. At the end of the meal, she goes, that was the most beautiful turkey I've ever seen. That was a fantastic meal, and I think you ought to write a cookbook. I was pretty taken aback. And I said, well, I didn't expect that. But it ended up it was Karen Duffy, who was Duff on MTV, the VJ. She connected me with her agent, and I said, well, I'm not ready for this right now. Let's talk after the new year. I've got too much on my plate because we had just opened the restaurant in Chicago. The pandemic came, and in a matter of 2 weeks, 3 other people told me I should write it. So I called her back and said, can I still talk to that agent? And she said, of course. And he immediately loved the idea of what I wanted to do and sold it to HarperCollins.
What are you going to learn from the cookbook?
That life is a whole lot better when you share it with your friends and your family. You like each other better, you feel better, tell funnier stories, you learn more.
How much time do you spend in St. Augustine?
A little bit more than 6 months a year.
6 months a year. Now, did you just strictly pull this content, this thought process just from you cooking in the kitchen?
I've got a catalog of recipes I've done over the years. I've got like 400 recipes, that I can reel into. But I started thinking that I was trying to put it together with stories I could tell. And, there's stories of different people at different restaurants I worked at. Whether, I cooked for Princess Margaret in New York, or if I cooked for Frank Sinatra at a dinner party, very funny piece. And having a nun, chase me down in a convent across the street from where I grew up and make me eat a tomato for the first time and making me fall in love with tomatoes.
The Sinatra, I had a guest on here, Gianni Russo, and he was, I guess, Costello's friend or whatever when Sinatra worked at the Copa. What time period?
That was before.
Way before. What was that story like with Sinatra?
Had decided to have a dinner party for Sinatra. Sinatra was singing that night at Madison Square Garden, and Red Buttons was having a dinner party for 12 people in the back private room. So they came in after Sinatra had finished at the Garden. They sat down, and waiters went out and laid out everything and told them what was going to be happening, what they were going to be eating. About 5 minutes later, Barbara Sinatra was at the kitchen door saying, my husband and I, we don't eat lamb. Is there something else we could have? And I said, well, I can make you Dover sole. Would you like Dover sole? And she goes, that would be perfect. We finished the meal and the dessert and everything. And all of a sudden, Sinatra's at the door of the kitchen. And he's like, who made that fish? So I immediately point to my fish guy, Johnny Marsh. And Sinatra goes over, hands him a $100 bill, and then just starts handing out money to everybody in the kitchen. Well, we fell in love with Sinatra right there. Not that I wasn't a big fan of his anyway, but when he left, we all went out. There was a side door to the restaurant. We all ran out and ran to the front, cheered him as he got into his limo limo and kind of waved to us all. Sinatra, he was pretty cool.
Who would you say was the most fascinating in the book?
Sinatra was good, but I have to go back to this nun, this Sister Friedberta, who when we were young growing up, we used to raid this convent across the street. This woman, we used to just basically steal all their apples and hit their cherry trees. And, one day this nun caught me and turned me around because I was moving so slow because I was holding so many apples. And she saw the apples. She said, "Well, if you like this, eat this." And she handed me a tomato. And I was like, when I bit into it, it was one of the best things I'd ever eaten in my life. And I've been looking for that tomato ever since. So I came up with this idea, and we've got this tomato pie recipe in our book that's actually quite wonderful.
When you talk about, the foods today, how do you do being in the restaurant business, picking your ingredients? What are the best ingredients to pick? Is there a way you go about that, or is there certain people have you used over the years? Because of, you got organic, not organic in restaurants and so forth. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, as much organic as you can get is great. When I was Shelter Island, I had gotten this job. When I first went out to New York, I was working for I'd gotten the guy who did the catering for Saturday Night Live. Had a restaurant in Shelter Island. His name was Eric Pergel. He's French. And I was going to go out to the Culinary Institute in New York. And he said, "Oh, Andy, you know that. You come work for me and I will teach you everything." So I went out and worked for him. And so I met all the fishing boats. I went to the farmers' stands. I was seeing, the farm to table stuff before a lot of people were, I thought. And then now it's, who's your fishmonger? Who's your produce guy? Where are you getting your stuff from? And as soon as they start sending you stuff that's not up to par on somebody else, that's the problem. Suppliers aren't giving you good enough stuff, they'll be out of business.
How do you get in the right position with the supplier in this day and time in the restaurant business?
A lot of it is word of mouth. It really is. You talk to other guys in the business who you trust and their opinion, and they're pretty quick. They'll tell you who's good and who's not.
If I find a good place, I'll go back, because I think if you find a good place that has good food, it's hard to find those places, No,
it's not easy to find it, but it's also the prices today are astronomical. They've just risen so much, and we're, trying to keep the prices down, but sometimes you just can't, and you hope people understand that. I think most of the time they do. I spent $20 the other day on breakfast for myself, and that was kind of crazy. So,
how much of an increase have you seen with all the stuff that's going on?
Oh, it's gone up, almost 30%.
How do you manage that to continue to be profitable?
Some things you don't serve anymore. That's one of them. I mean, we used to have crab cakes, so crab cakes were wonderful. They still are one. My crab cakes are great, but it's $37 a pound, in some places to get, good crab. You can use the backfill stuff, backfin and use some cheaper stuff. But if you want a lump crab cake, you're going to pay for it.
Where do we want to find all Andy Murray stuff, the book? Tell me where we need to look for that.
The book is called Eat, Drink, and Be Murray, a feast of family fun and favorites. My brother Billy does the foreword, which is wonderful. There is YouTube videos out that I've done that have some, I'm working on more. I've got, I think about 6 of them done right now that have the recipes that I make on camera for them. But you can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Target. You can get it at Walmart. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can go online. You can go to HarperCollins and get it. It's all major bookstores that got it, and even a lot of small ones too. Some good places in Chicago.
Well, have you thought about opening a place down there in Charleston with your brother?
No, I don't want. When I go to Charleston, I don't want to work. I have too good of a time when I go to Charleston.
What's your favorite place down there?
Oh, Fig. Yeah.
How about the grocery? Have you been to the grocery?
No, I haven't been to the grocery. I haven't been up, because of the pandemic. I haven't been up in a couple of years. Oh, yeah. No, I'm going to go up in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be going up there. That's the first time. I was supposed to go up at Thanksgiving, and I got COVID.
Now, did your family get together during the holidays or no?
Christmas, I stayed at my sister's house. She and her husband bought the house we grew up in, and my 3 sisters are in the Chicago area. My brother Brian came up from Kansas. Billy and Johnny were in New York, and Joel was in California. But we all get together. We have a golf tournament every year in April in St. Augustine, and everyone shows up for that.
Check out Andy Murray's book. He's a restaurant owner, chef, and he's
Eat, Drink, and Be Murray.
Eat, Drink, and Be Murray. I'm glad you came on, man. It was good talking to you. And if you come down to Charleston, look us up. We're right off the Ravenel Bridge. Bridge. Make a left by the Scotchman. We'll be there. I love Charleston. It's a great place. I don't think I'm leaving.
My brother went down there and he decided he wasn't leaving either.
Yeah, so. It's a nice place. Like I said, again, restaurant owner, chef, author, Andy Murray. Got a famous brother, Mr. Bill Murray. Thanks for coming on this show. My name's John Edmonds Kozma, the CEO of Bang Productions.
Thank you, John. I appreciate having me.